Hello students, Assalamu alaikum. In the previous lecture, we have discussed the transport in plants. Today we are going to talk about transport systems in humans. Like all the higher animals, the task of the transport of different materials in human body is performed by two systems, blood circulatory system and the lymphatic system. These two systems are well coordinated and associated with each other. It means that they both work side by side with each other and their functions are linked with each other. Here we will go in detail about more about circulatory system. Human circulatory system have a closed blood pathway or circulatory system. It means that the blood never leaves the network of the arteries, veins, and capillaries. Means from the heart towards the cells and back from the cells to the heart. So it's called a closed circular. It keeps on moving in a closed circular pathway. The main components of this human blood circulatory system are blood, heart, and blood vessels. But in this lecture, we are going to talk about only blood. So let's see what is blood and what is the function of blood. If you remember, in unit 4, we have discussed in connective tissues and different kinds of tissues of plants and animals. We have discussed that blood is an example of a connective tissue. Blood is basically a fluid that is present in our vessels, and it is performing the function of transportation of various materials across the whole body. This is the picture that shows the whole network of your circulatory system. The red ones are your arteries and the blue ones are your veins. The red one arteries are moving from the heart towards the cells of the whole body, and the veins, that is the blue purple image that you can see, the vessels, they move from the cells towards the heart, carrying the deoxygenated blood and the wasted material. Now, this fluid, that is blood, it helps in transportation of various materials. And how and what kind of things it transports? It transports from the heart. It takes the oxygen and nutrients to the cells of different parts of the body, and from those cells it takes through the veins, it takes the deoxygenated blood and carbon dioxide and other waste products from the tissues and cells and bring it back to the heart. That is why it's called a closed circuit, because it starts from the heart to the cells and back from the cells to the heart. Now, this is the cross section of a vessel present in our body. It consists of different components as well as a fluid, liquidy substance in it that is called plasma. And the major portion of the blood vessel is plasma, and the next that is 55%, and the rest of the cells are 45%. Plasma itself has a specific composition which includes different nutrients, water, different proteins and enzymes, some salts, etc. as well. Other than this plasma, there are red blood cells in it. These smaller things are platelets. These are cell-like substances, but they are not proper cells. Then white blood cells, which have different shapes that you can see here in purple. According to their function, they have different shapes, and there are various kinds of white blood cells that we will discuss later. Now, when we want to study the components of the blood and what is basically the composition of the blood, we need to separate out all these things that are present inside the blood through some mechanism. For that, we use a centrifugation machine. First, what will you do? You will take a sample from a patient of blood, and then you will put it in a centrifugation machine. What does a centrifugation machine does? It basically separates out all the components from a fluid, whatever is present in that fluid. It separates it out on the basis of the densities or the sizes of the components present inside it. So when we have centrifuged the blood, it showed us this result. We got a liquid on the top, that is plasma, the yellow one. We got white blood cells and platelets in a very small amount. That shows that these are present in a very small amount in the total blood. And then we have red blood cells shown by the red liquid. Now, what is the quantity present in the blood of these things? Plasma is approximately around 55%. That is, it comprises the most of the, more than half of the volume of the blood. While the rest of these three kinds of cells are around 45% altogether. This plasma has more other nutrients, as I told you before. It has water, it has salts, it has so many proteins and other nutrients as well. Some bicarbonates and some small nutrients in a very trace amounts: calcium, magnesium, copper, zinc, etc. Some very important proteins are also present in it. this is, as you can see, this is plasma is 55% and the all the other three cells are 45%. So in short, what is the composition of the blood? The blood comprises of basically two things. One, the cells that are called, also known as formed elements, and the other is liquid. The liquid part is the plasma, and the cells have further three categories or types: red blood cells, white blood cells, and platelets. Out of these three cells have their own functions, different kind of functions. Red blood cells is mainly responsible for the transportation. White blood cells is responsible for the defense mechanism of the body. We'll study this later when we will talk about white blood cells. Platelets are also somehow helping in some of the functions of the body. We will discuss them when we will talk about platelets. Let's first see what is the plasma and what are the other names of these cells. Plasma is 55%, as I told you before. Blood cells are 45%. This is the diagram showing all kinds of cells in it, all three kinds of cells in it. Now, there are other names for these that we use. Red blood cells are also known as erythrocytes. They are also called as erythrocytes, while white blood cells are also known as WBCs or leukocytes. And the third one, platelets, is also known as thrombocytes. They are further divided into some other types that we will discuss when we are talking about these cells separately. Okay. Platelets are not proper cells, they are cell-like bodies. All these three kinds of cells that are plasma, that are present in the blood other than plasma, are produced from the bone marrow. Let's see their composition. In the RBCs, that is our red blood cells, they have different ranges in males and females. For example, a cubic meter, 1 cubic millimeter of your blood in a male has 5 to 5.5 million of RBCs, while in female the same quantity, 1 cubic millimeter, has 4 to 4.5 million of the RBCs. In the start, when these cells are formed in the bone marrow, they have a nucleus in the start when they are immature. But in mammals specifically, when they become mature and they move towards the blood, they lose their nucleus. So they are anucleated. Red blood cells in a mature mammal is anucleated, means it does not have a nucleus. Now, what is the shape of these RBCs? We are going to discuss only red blood cells in this lecture today. Okay, so let's talk about the characteristics and the properties of RBCs. First of all, we understood that the function of RBCs is to transport oxygen. We'll talk about it, how it transports. Before that, let's see what is the size and what is the shape of this red blood cell. It is biconcave in shape. This is a specific shape that helps in its function of transportation. Plus, it has also an elastic membrane that is surrounded by the cell is surrounded by which membrane. Okay. Now, how does it transport oxygen throughout the body? This RBC has 95% of a protein called hemoglobin. Basically, this protein is a globular protein that is present inside the red blood cells, and it has a specific group that is called HB, heme group, or hemoglobin. This hemoglobin has the tendency to attach to an oxygen molecule. This oxygen molecule, when we inhale or breathe in, this oxygen molecule is diffused in our alveoli of the lungs, inside the lungs. And the capillaries, the red blood cells that are present around those alveoli, they exchange or diffuse from the those oxygen molecules from there into the capillaries, and hence this red blood cell makes a bond with this oxygen molecule and forms a complex that is called oxyhemoglobin. It's because it's a bond between oxygen molecule and hemoglobin. So it forms an oxyhemoglobin. Now this red blood cell has an oxyhemoglobin inside it. Now these cells, when move with this oxyhemoglobin, they will travel throughout the vessels into the body across the whole circulatory pathway, and they will reach specific cells where they will release this oxygen to the cells that require that oxygen, any cells of the body. So this is how they transport oxygen towards the cells. So 95% of the red blood cell cytoplasm is comprising of this hemoglobin, globular protein, while the rest 5% has some other enzymes and salts. Okay, so basic function is transportation of oxygen that is done by this hemoglobin. This is how transportation is done. And the rest is salts and enzymes which have other functions. Now, where are these RBCs, WBCs, and platelets formed? They are formed in your bone marrow. What is a bone marrow? Bone marrow is that squishy substance that is present inside the bones. Now, when the humans or an animal is in embryonic or a fetal stage, they obviously then they don't have proper defined bones, and if they don't have bones, they don't have bone marrow. So at that stage, the RBCs are, because they need blood at that time as well, obviously. So at that time, the blood is formed. These cells are formed in the liver and the spleen, in the embryonic and the fetal stage. This is basically the immature stage of a mammal or other animals. When the human being becomes adult, means his bones are properly defined and strong, and the bone marrow is present inside the bones. So then these cells are RBCs, WBCs, and the other platelets. They are then formed in the bone marrow. Now, what is a lifespan? Every cell has a specific life cycle till which it lives, and after that it becomes disintegrated itself. The lifespan of the red blood cells is 120 days. You must have heard that it's good to give off your own blood to other people. By this, you're actually purifying your own blood. Why does the doctors and other people say this? Because when you are giving off the blood, then your body does not need to destroy those RBCs. You're actually making use of your blood that is of no use to yourself, because your blood is continuously being regenerated after every 120 days. So when the 120 days are over and your red blood cells are still there in your body, they will be phagocytosed by your own cells in the liver and spleen. Now, what is phagocytosis? Phagocytosis is a process by which a cell or a dead cell, you can say, is taken in by the active cells. And in this animal cells, we have got lysosomes that secrete specific enzymes to kill a dead cell or any other organism. So these RBCs that become dead, after this, they are engulfed and phagocytosed by the other active cells in the liver and spleen, and then they are killed and completely vanished. And new cells are formed in the bone marrow of an adult. So this is how this is done. It breaks in the liver and the spleen. This was all about your red blood cells, white blood cells, and platelets. We'll discuss about white blood cells and platelets in detail in the next lecture. This was to sum up our lecture. We discussed today that the transport system of humans is comprising of two main systems, that is circulatory system and the lymphatic system. We are talking about circulatory system right now, and that circulatory system comprises of your heart, your blood, and your vessels, that is arteries and veins. Here we will talk about only blood. We have discussed only blood. The function of blood, what is the main function of the blood? The blood has so many functions, but the main function is transportation of oxygen and other nutrients across the whole body. Now, what are the components of this blood? This blood has two kinds of things. One is the formed elements or the cells, and the other is the liquid substance, that is the plasma. Plasma is made up of water, other nutrients, proteins, salts, and some very small minerals in very trace amounts. And it comprises of about 55% of the total blood volume, while the rest of the blood volume, 45%, comprises of the second part of the blood, that is blood cells. There are three kinds of cells that are present inside that blood: red blood cells, white blood cells, and platelets. We do not count platelets as cells because they are not properly defined cells. They are just the fragments or the cell-like bodies of the cells, right? Now, RBCs are also known as erythrocytes, WBCs are also known as leukocytes, and platelets are also known as thrombocytes. The main function of RBC is to transport oxygen across the body. White blood cells function is to provide defense against the incoming or organisms or invaders inside the body. Third is platelets. It has also its function in some of the in prevention of body damage. Again, now, where are these cells formed? These cells are formed in the bone marrow. When the human or the mammal or an animal is in the fetal or the embryonic stage, these cells are formed in the liver or spleen. When the mammal becomes adult, the bones are defined. They have a bone marrow inside their bones. In those bone marrow, some stem cells are produced, and those stem cells further produces this RBC, WBC, and platelets. Now, they all have a specific lifespan. Here we talk about only RBCs in this lecture. RBCs, that is red blood cells, have a lifespan of 120 days, and after this 120 days are over, they are killed by their own cells of the liver and spleen by the process of phagocytosis. How RBC is helping in transportation of the oxygen? RBCs basically have, their cytoplasm is comprised of 95% of the whole cytoplasm of RBC is basically made up of a globular protein which has a heme group inside it. That heme group has an ability, hemoglobin group basically, it has the ability to join with the oxygen molecules. So RBCs having hemoglobin join with oxygen molecule and they form a oxyhemoglobin complex inside the RBCs. Then these red blood cells move across the whole body through the blood and reaches the cells that require oxygen and diffuses the oxygen from the relieves the oxygen from the complex towards the cells. And the same process continues by the veins as well, where the deoxygenated blood and the waste products from the cells are taken from that from those cells towards the heart again. Okay, so here we are talking about RBCs only, so I'm just revising that topic. So RBCs are basic. This is how it helps in the transportation of your oxygen. Okay, that is it. I hope it's clear to you. Still, if you have any questions, you can tell me in the next lecture and we'll discuss. Thank you.